Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jane Wakiwaka. I'm the Sustainability Manager at the Crown Estate. And I'm here to talk about what does health and well-being mean from a landlord perspective, just to give you some examples and our own experiences about where some of those opportunities lie, as well as some of the risks and challenges that we've faced from a landlord-developer perspective. As a bit of background as to who we are an independent commercial business, so we're not owned by the Queen or the government. Just some stats in terms of our performance. So in 2015, 2016, 100% of our profits do go to Treasury, and that was about 304 million. And our capital value is just under 13 billion. And what we're trying to achieve is essentially deliver an annual return to the Treasury, as well as measure our performance against a bespoke IPD benchmark. And that's agreed on a 3-year basis. And from our perspective, we are a little bit different from other landlords that are out there because we take a very long-term approach to how we manage and invest in our assets. Our investment strategy is focused on 4 core sectors. So we're not just property. We have an extensive rural and strategic land portfolio as well as offshore wind. My focus is more around the central London and the regional portfolios, which is kind of where the real estate sits. So our central London portfolio comprises the majority of the freehold of Regent Street and about 50% of St James's, which is a mix of commercial offices, retail and some residential, and then our regional portfolio, which is predominantly retail park shopping centres. So that's just a bit of context as to who we are. In terms of why health and well-being we feel is important, just kind of taking a slightly different stance looking at the value of the industry. If you look at the Global Wellbeing Institute, they've estimated that the health and well-being industry itself represents over $3.7 trillion in 2015, and that was a 10% increase from 2013. So a massive increase, and I agree with John that it's not a trend, it's something that I think is in the general psyche of people. Of that $3.7 trillion, they estimated about 120 billion was in real estate alone, and about an additional 45 billion was in workplace. So in terms of the market and the value of health and well-being in real estate specifically, it is something that it's huge, and I think it's something that's set to grow. And kind of picking up again on some of the headlines that John mentioned as well. If you look at London and air quality as an example, these are some of the headlines that you'll probably be familiar with. I think again it's being quite normalized in terms of and there's a general awareness of health and well-being. Air quality is a really good example of that, but coupled alongside that media presence is the political responses to that. So if you're looking at Sadiq Khan and one of his key manifesto pledges, it's around air quality, and health and well-being is very much at the heart of that. Don't want to go into this in too much detail because again, I think there'll be people talking about it, and John's mentioned the UK GBC. Just specifically on GRESB, I just wanted to highlight from an investor point of view, GRESB is the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. Since last year, they have adopted or incorporated a health and well-being module. So it's something now that investors are increasingly looking at. And I think GRESB is a really good opportunity for investors to understand the ESG performance of assets and portfolios. So if health and well-being is increasingly being incorporated in GRESB, then again, that's a really good indication that within real estate, health and well-being as a topic is here to stay. And then lastly, just wanted to pick up on the technology advances, which again, John mentioned. And I think this is a real key risk to us if we don't understand some of the data that's coming through. I think with the increase of wearable technology, you are seeing democratization of data availability. And what does that mean? So we've talked about apps where you can try and avoid places where there's lots of congestion, where there's poor air quality. And I think from a landlord and investor point of view, we don't actively engage in it. I think there's a real risk that we make our buildings and the locations that we're in obsolete. And so that's something that we need to try and avoid in the long term. So where are some of the opportunities that lie? And I've segmented it into buildings, placemaking, and then partnerships. So I'm going to just talk about each of those areas separately. So at a building level, we've talked about well certification, and for us as the Crown Estate, we've been looking at it from both a core and shell or a new build point of view, as well as the fit out. that's St James's Market, which is soon to be our new office. We are in the process of moving offices, and we have been looking at the WELL certification standard from a fit-out point of view. And that's been really important to understand from an occupier perspective, how does WELL actually work? And where are some of the key opportunities and where are some of the challenges? And actually, for us, one of the biggest challenges that we found was around the nourishment section and the procurement of catering, just because I think it is quite an American standard, and some of the nourishment requirements aren't really kind of normal in the UK. So we're talking about like lots of labelling. We've also been using the UK GBC's framework to understand both we're at the pre-stage. We've got a lot of data right now in terms of how our current building's performing. We've been doing the Leesman survey, as well as a lot of HR stats and environmental quality monitoring, and we'll be doing that post-survey, post-office move as well, post-survey. In terms of new developments, we have been looking at quite a constrained development, both in terms of size and location, because it's in a conservation area. And we've been doing a gap analysis to look at what does WELL certification for a core and shell building look like. I think some of the benefits is that because it's a performance-based certification, there's some flexibility in terms of how you might go about achieving some of that performance standards. But because it's performance-related, there is a risk associated with it as well. And I think the two key risks are reputational. So what happens if we don't achieve WELL? So does that mean that it's an unhealthy building? And how do you quantify that risk? And I think at this stage, because it's so early, there is a risk that we're having to pay a premium because supply chains may not be fully geared for it. I wait to be contested on that. And also, are contractors are they willing to take that risk as well? I think as an investor community, we're still not quite sure in terms of value and how do you demonstrate the value of that. And then finally, it's about how do you define accountability and responsibility, especially for a core and shell building. So if you've got a multi-let, multi-use office, at what point do you do your commissioning? At what point do you do your testing? And how do you then demonstrate as a base build your building is healthy? So that's some of the things that from a practical point of view we're having to face. But we're not just looking at it from a development point of view, and I think we have to look at it in terms of the in-use side as well. So we've been conducting with our post-occupancy evaluations across our buildings. We've set benchmarks in terms of where we want our buildings to be. And we want our buildings to be in a certain quartile, because ultimately we're in the business of creating buildings for people to occupy, for customers to occupy. And we want to make sure that those buildings are performing as they're intended to. We've also been doing some internal air quality testing as well. And we've talked about data and the access of data and the challenges associated with monitoring. But I think one of the biggest risks to the landlord is the quality of that data and how people are using that data to inform their decisions. And but for us, by taking quite a proactive approach to things like internal air quality testing, it means that we understand fully how those buildings are working. And we can demonstrate and work with our occupiers to see how their spaces are actually performing. And I think it does provide a really good opportunity to develop those relationships with the customer. So we're participating in the Wellbeing Lab as well, but we're looking at it from a landlord perspective. We're working with ARIP and with one of our occupiers, so who are in sustainability as well, which is really important. And I think Darren's going to talk about some of the outcomes from that further on, but from my end, it's really demonstrated that our occupiers are really engaged in health and well-being. They don't quite understand what it actually means and how does it actually work and how do you go about measuring it. So this has been a really useful exercise to look at how we can engage with our occupiers, how we can support them, not just in terms of their own fit out, but also in terms of their operational requirements that can maximize their own health and well-being. But I do think that we do focus quite a lot within buildings, and from a landlord point of view, we do need to think a bit more broadly. So it's not just about buildings, and placemaking is something that's really important to us at the Crown Estate, and it's something that we've done a lot of investment in. So just some examples of what we've done. Some of you may be familiar with Oxford Circus. We don't actually own Oxford Circus, so we have to work with TfL in Westminster. But this is what it was in 2007, and this is what it looks like now, as you may be more familiar. For us, it was really important to invest in that, in Oxford Circus, and make it work. We're also thinking in context of increased urbanization, increased densification, increased footfall. So by just changing some of the public realm initiatives, we've been able to increase capacity by 60%. I know it's still congested, so we are working on it. But I think, somewhere like Oxford Circus, it's not something that's just reputation. If we don't get it right, the reputation doesn't impact us just in terms of London, but it's a national and an international reputation that we're having to look at. And it's really important that we look at how we can make these spaces actually work for the people that visit and work there. And just another example, this is just north of Piccadilly Circus on Glasshouse Street. This is again in 2007. And I think there's a lot of poor perceptions around safety, and pedestrians didn't really feel comfortable, and we've changed that so that it's much more pedestrian friendly. We're giving the streets back to people, but at the same time looking at how do we reduce congestion and air quality as well. So we've been looking at how do we support our occupiers around freight consolidation, waste consolidation, to try and minimize traffic as well, to make those spaces actually work. And then finally, just kind of coming onto that, is around partnership and collaboration. I think there's a real opportunity from the landlord-investor point of view in terms of how we collaborate with different people. One of the things that I'm really proud of and really excited about is Wild West End. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is a partnership that we established in 2015 with 4 other West End landowners, as well as we're working in conjunction with the London Wildlife Trust, the GLA, and with ARUP on this. We felt it was important to work in partnership with other West End landowners because from a location point of view, we all face similar challenges. This isn't really a competition, and I think the more that we work together, the greater impact that we'll have. Wild West End isn't just about improving biodiversity and green infrastructure, but it's also about raising awareness with broader stakeholders that are out there, but also identifying where the additional value is. So it's looking at things like how green infrastructure can benefit air quality, noise, amenity, biophilia. So this is really what we're trying to achieve. And some examples from our end is we've launched allotment gardens. So working with our restaurant occupiers, growing their own produce on Regent Street that they can actually use within their stores. And don't worry, it's fine. The air quality up there is absolutely fine. So it's not like it's toxic or anything. But it's a really good way to engage with our customers as well. And we've had a really good level of interest from our customers. We've also been able to engage really proactively with a wider audience. So Summer Streets, hopefully some of you will be aware, these are traffic-free Sundays that we run on Regent Street in the summer. We've had Wild West End present there, and it's been a really great way to engage with the general public on what we're trying to do. Some of the green infrastructure that we're putting in place isn't necessarily visible, so we called it Secret Gardens of Regent Street, and people aren't really aware of what we're actually doing. It's been a really good way to engage with the broader audience as well. In terms of proactive asset management, we've also implemented a Wellbeing program, and this is very much for our customers or our occupiers. We've been running an 18-month program to date, providing yoga classes, mindfulness classes, etc. And it's been a really good way to support our occupiers' health and well-being agenda as well. And we've done a survey just to see how they've responded, and 92% of people have said that people do actually feel that the Wellbeing program has improved their own health and well-being. On the regional portfolio, we've looked at Thrive. So again, it's how do we use the spaces in a positive way so that they're more community hubs. And we did a nationwide campaign across 10 of our retail parks and shopping centres. And essentially, this program was there to sort of work with local community groups and national community groups to encourage health and well-being around food and fitness in particular. And we had an amazing response from people. We had focus on lots of different things, lots of different age groups. And I think as landlords, we really can actually do more than just what's within a building, but how are these spaces actually being used to benefit both the occupier and also the visitor experience as well. And then finally, just to end, I don't think, again, we should be focusing just on buildings. And one of the things that we're really passionate about is around the employment side of things. For us, Recruit London is one of our schemes that we've been running since 2009. And that's kind of focused on providing local, long-term unemployed people into local employment. We've had about over 1,000 people in Westminster alone. And we've been trying to focus now on how do we reach the harder to reach population. So we've been looking at, for example, the homeless agenda. And given that Westminster have the largest number of homeless people, how can we support them? We're not experts in homeless, so we have to work with a number of organizations. But last year we were able to support 3 homeless people into employment as well, which doesn't sound like a very large number, but because of the issues that these people face, I think it's been really positive to support them. And that's something that we're now doing regionally as well. So we've got 3 schemes up and running on our regional portfolio. And then the living wage element, I think, is really something that the Crown Estate feels strongly with. We're the first nationwide property company to achieve living wage accreditation. So again, we've been looking at what does that mean for our supply chain. Do they have the living wage in London, for example, to support their standard, a certain standard of living? And it's been, I think, it's our responsibility as well as landlords to engage with our customers and our occupiers to understand their position. We can't tell them to pay a living wage, but at least we can get that dialogue going. And I think that's a really important part in terms of promoting their own staff health and well-being. So just in summary, my belief is that health and well-being is increasingly gaining traction amongst landlords and investors. I think there's some challenges. It is still very new to us in terms of how do we quantify that, how do we quantify the risks, and where's the value in that. But I do think strongly that opportunities do exist, not just at the building level, but in terms of development and asset management, but it is much broader than at a building level. It is around the public realm and the placemaking, and I think we can do a lot more if we collaborate and work together in partnerships. That's me. Thank you.